Hello and welcome to Unlocking Learning Pathways, the podcast where we take a deep dive into the journeys of lifelong learners who are reshaping their perspectives and skills. I'm Paula Harper Grant, and today in our second episode, we are talking with Marvin Boyce. Marvin recently completed a series of transformative courses in public sector accounting and policy analysis that opened his eyes to new approaches in financial planning, program budgets, and public sector governance. Marvin, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Lovely. Now, Marvin, I want you to just share with us what is one of the most memorable moments from your experience on the course that you would have done?
There were a lot of experiences that I thought were quite enlightening. The one thing that really stood out to me was the way that the course allowed itself to challenge my views on certain aspects of being in the public service. I would have been in the public service from 2012, so a little over 10 years, and you think that you know a lot of different why things are done and why certain things happen, but the course really shed a light on the real reason why certain things are done in the public service, and how you can improve aspects of the public service, why things like public sector reform, for example, are important and should be explored.
So what do you think then made that realization so impactful for you?
I would say one thing that really stood out for me is maybe the way that I looked at neutrality in the public service. I was one of those people that thought that was just a concept where it just meant we as public service stayed in the middle. We didn't get involved in anything to do with the political realities around us, and that was what our job and our role was. While doing the course, as part of it, I would have done a research paper on the neutrality in the public service, and I realized that it wasn't just staying in the middle. It was about making sure that you can give good advice to politicians and the political directorate, and making sure that you never lose your ability to remain you lose the ability to become a hindrance to the new government that's coming in. It's probably the best way to put it.
Now, that's fantastic, and it's so amazing how a deeper understanding can truly elevate your day-to-day work. Now, can you also share some specific ways this training would have influenced your approach to budgeting or policy development?
Right. So, as part of my job, I do some policy development. The course allowed me to see that policy development is just not a one-off instance that happens. It's something that happens over time. Is really data driven, and it is something that you come back to all the time. You collect, you do your surveys, you collect your different data and see how you can improve the policy within itself. And it's just not this snapshot in time that I thought it used to be.
No, we kind of jump forward, so now we can jump back a little bit. No. Tell me more about the name of the course you would have done and what it would have entailed.
Right, so the course would have been a diploma in a postgraduate diploma, in public sector management. That was what the course was. It contained different courses in HR management, in e-governance, in the same financial management, the policy analysis, project management analysis. It was a wide swath of different courses that would aid a public servant that was in a position to have to look at these different aspects of government.
Seems like a very valuable course to have pursued. And I wonder, can you just share with us about a specific policy that you've worked on where you were able to put this learning into practice?
Right. So during, do you mean during the course in terms of what I
Having,
would have done, or since the
yes,
course is
since the
finished?
course, yes.
All right. So since the course is finished, it was not just me, but obviously other people in my department. We would have worked on the solid waste, policy for Barbados. The course really, but we didn't have as much data collection as I would have liked, obviously, because we don't want to have a situation where, in trying to collect too much data, you kind of paralyze the process. So, is when you get to operationalize these things on the ground, you realize some of the limitations that come with the things that you learn during the course. However, while it might have been ideal, the policy that came out at the end, the process was a valuable process to be a part of, and it was, you saw ways that we could improve it in the future with more time and more resources, given the additional knowledge from the course.
Let's talk a bit about your experience with policy analysis.
Right.
What insights did you gain about policy evaluation, and how has that affected your work?
Right. So as part of the development of new policies, I we would have done some evaluation of, well, as part of the course, sorry, we would have done some evaluation of existing policies. We would have used locally derived policies, which bode well for the future when I got back into work, actually dealing with policies, because it allows me to analyze policies that we're using maybe as a template for new policies in Barbados, or just to see, get different ideas of how different people do certain things. So that course allowed me to have a better understanding of what a bad policy is and what the deficiencies of some policies are. So which was quite enlightening when it came to developing our own policies in the future.
Now, that's a very interesting point, because policies that adapt to changing needs make a huge difference in public service. So, given this new perspective, Marvin, how do you handle instances when a policy needs to be upheld but may feel outdated or restrictive?
I haven't actually had that experience so far since we finished the course. However, for me moving forward, that the course allows me to better explain to the persons responsible for financing the value of collecting data, the value of analyzing these policies before we say we're finalized, the value of even analyzing an existing policy to see, is it working, is it achieving the goal. Because even something as simple as just setting goals for what the policy wants to achieve is one of the things that I find we sometimes fail doing in government at the moment, where we have a policy and I have a definition of what I think it should achieve. You have a different definition, but no one's ever written down what we actually are trying to achieve and what we actually see as the goal. So that's one of the failings. But moving forward with future policies, that is something that can be corrected. Persons that would have done this course now are now throughout the civil service, and they can help improve these policies that are coming out, so that we don't have this problem being repeated going forward in the future.
I imagine your insight into governance and reform has also influenced this perspective. So, what would you say stood out to you about governance reform, and how does it shape your work?
What stood out to me is the number of different types of governance that exist. You live in Barbados, you're just accustomed to the system that we have. Is when you see the other systems that exist in other jurisdictions, the rationale for why certain styles of governance in the public service fail. For example, systems like the new public management system that they would have had in places like Jamaica, you get why it failed. why that system is no longer seen as an ideal system to use. And it really gets you thinking about, why decisions are made for public sector management in Barbados, why sometimes the decision of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, why it takes so long, because this is a big decision, and it's one of those decisions that we can't take lightly.
Now, earlier you would have spoken about neutrality. First, what is neutrality, and how did the training change your understanding of neutrality in the public service?
Right. So there are many different definitions of neutrality in the public service, but what I would say is probably the ability of a civil servant to advise politicians of an incumbent government, even if this advice runs counter to the policies of the government which was in charge before. Essentially, that is in a nutshell what it is.
So then how did the course then shape this perspective for you?
Right. So for me, I always took it as we as civil servants stayed in the middle. So we weren't concerned with the political wranglings of either side of the political spectrum. We stayed in the middle, and we did what we thought was the best thing to achieve the policies that are for Barbados. Because after doing the course, I recognized that it doesn't matter who the policy comes from. It doesn't matter your view on the policy. It doesn't matter the incumbent government the incumbent government's view on the policy. If that's the policy right now, we execute the policy. If the incumbent government decides to change it, make a tweak to it, then we move with them. And we move forward with the policy that they have decided, that they have set is the policy.
That's a critical insight. Right. And I think neutrality is truly something many people might take for granted. But how do you put that into practice, especially in situations where there may be strong opinions or competing interests?
All right. It's a good question. And neutrality is an evolving sector an evolving academic school of thought in terms of the erosion of neutrality and what this means for the future of public services in not just Barbados but in the world. When a government comes into power, it'll have its different political goals. It's our job to ensure that their political goals are successful to the best of our ability, even if we may have a personal belief that that it isn't the right way or the right path. That's not our role. Our role is to ensure that the political directorate are able to achieve the goals of the politician or the party in power at the time. The real reason for that is when a new politician gets into power or a new party gets into power, they are not supposed to think that the civil service has now been corrupted by the politician that is leaving or the party that is no longer in power. That it doesn't matter if it's whoever it is, we're just working to achieve their goal and their policies without being overtly political. So once you aren't overtly partisan, then you're just supposed to try to achieve the goals of the politician and the party in power at the time.
Now that's truly a balanced approach, Marvin, and I'm sure some of our listeners who are working in government or in any field for that matter can take away these very valuable lessons. Now, if you could take just one lesson that you would have learned from this training and share it with every new public sector officer, what would that lesson be?
Everything that happens in government has a reason for it to happen. While you may think it's bureaucratic or it doesn't make sense in 2024, there's a reason it exists, and sometimes you just need to find out the reason to have an understanding of why it's being done. That would be my advice.
No, that's a very interesting point because we often hear the public sector getting a lot of licks from people outside,
Right.
in terms of the archaic processes and government workers don't work, they don't do this, they don't do that, right? What would you say, having completed this training, what would you say to those persons?
What I would say is the public sector isn't perfect. It's like any other industry in Barbados. They have the good workers and the bad workers, but there are things being put in place, and there are plans to reform our public sector to make it more performance driven. However, persons need to understand that while we may want a public sector, that's more performance driven, we also don't want it to behave like the private sector. The public sector's role is to provide social services, not to try to turn a profit. And if we ask for the public sector to start to perform like the private sector, then you get into the different governance models like new public management, which, research is showing in recent times was a failure in a lot of our regional jurisdictions. So what I would say is we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just try to, use what we have and enhance it and make it better, while looking at the fact that a lot of the problems that we have in the public sector are driven by individuals not adhering to different systems, or individuals not being as professional as they should be.
Now, in our last podcast, one of the issues that we would have tackled would have been the issue of transfer of training.
Right.
Having done this training, how easy or how difficult was it for you to be able to use what you would have learned in your day-to-day job?
Because the training that I would have gotten is for senior level officers in the public sector. The problem is that there are aspects of it that I don't participate in day to day. So that is a challenge when you've been trained into how to do certain things that you're not using or making use of day to day. That can be a challenge, I would say.
What did you enjoy most about the program? And what did you enjoy the least as well?
The most? Well, I'm not sure if they're doing it this way anymore, but when we were doing the course, it was online. It was done in an online manner where the lectures were done online. Well, I liked it for the convenience, because at the time I would have had a young child. Well, she's still young now, but it was more convenient, because I had to come home and help my wife with certain things just before the class starts. So that convenience did help. What I didn't like about it is also the lack of the face-to-face. So while on one hand I like the convenience, I also didn't like the fact that we didn't get that face-to-face interaction. And then one of the first times we met in person would have been then at an exam as a class.
No, you always go into a course, a training program, and you have certain expectations. So let's talk about what you expected versus what you got.
There are a couple of critiques that I would have had with the course. I would have liked it to be more specific to the public sector of Barbados. However, I understand the rationale for that, because you would have had courses that you would have shared with other persons doing other degrees and other master's programs. So I understand that it wasn't that easy to tailor make it for the public sector in Barbados. So, for example, the HR course that they had other master's degrees that would have been using that same course. So it's difficult for them to tailor it to Barbados. But beyond that, I would say it was a good experience, the course itself.
There are some people who don't see the value of training, or who may have done training 20 years ago. And I have a master's from 20 years ago, and I don't need to go back and study now. I'm too old for that. My brain can't handle that. What would you say to these people? What would you say is the importance of training in the public service?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that is important. While you may have learned something 20 years ago, because again, I'm not, it's not as much as 20 years, but my first degree would be in engineering. And in terms of, I would have done that degree about 14 years ago. So when you're not keeping up with the new ways people are doing things, the new technology, or you're just not up to date, it makes it harder to communicate with a younger generation who are now coming out of university and learning all these new skills. So, you know, I know it's intimidating, and I know I might be the wrong messenger given, my age, but I think it's one of those things that we need to take seriously, and it seems like one of those things that successful governments of a whole have taken seriously. The first had the training division, and then that would transition to the learning and development directorate. So I think it's something that while we all get older and we all say, it's not for me anymore. Even at my age, sometimes I say, it's not for me. It's too young. I still think, we need to still try to, keep our skills up.
So, what attracted you to this particular course?
Originally, I saw the course as a way to, get some more skills that I may need in my work, like such as the policy development we mentioned earlier. And that was probably one of my main focus topics in terms of, doing this course. It's only when the course started that, I saw the value of like a lot of the other courses that we had. And then I started thinking to myself, well, this could have been enhanced if we did this and if we did that. But then no, I would be creating a course for myself and, not for everybody else. But yeah, I would say it would be the policy development aspect. I also am one of those people that concerned with like why things are done and how they're done. So even like stuff like the financing, like why was this done, or why do we do this, or how we do this, that was why also attracted me to the course. So what I would say is it would be more focused on stuff like that. Things like HR initially, the HR courses didn't initially attract me, but actually doing them and understanding a little bit about the psychology of people and why certain HR strategies are created, that also was interesting. And I think it made me a more well-rounded civil servant coming out at the end of the training.
Before we wrap up, I'd love to know if there's anything specific you are hoping to explore further in your personal career, like maybe a new area or skill that builds on what you would have already learned.
At the moment, because the learning and development directorate they run a series of different courses and things like that. There've been one or two that I found interesting that I'm thinking about participating in. But in terms of studying at this level, where it would be a diploma in postgraduate diploma or a degree or anything at that level, at this moment in time, I'm not really thinking about any additional studies in something like that. However, I'm open to any short courses that the Learning and Development Directorate would have. And from the perspective of me personally as a civil servant, the course itself opens the opportunity, obviously, for internal promotion within the service itself.
So thank you, Marvin, for sharing your inspiring story. And I'm sure our listeners would have found it very insightful.
Thank you for having me.
And that brings us to the end of this episode of Unlocking Learning Pathways. We hope Marvin's insights encourage you to look deeper into your own learning journey and find the why behind your work. Join us next time for more stories of growth and transformation. Until then, stay curious, stay motivated, and remember, the right insights can unlock incredible pathways.